Before we start, I need you to understand something about power. Real power. Not the kind that's elected. Not the kind that's inherited. The kind that's built in the shadows. The kind that protects itself by connecting itself to everyone. So that exposing it means exposing them too. This is the story of Jeffrey Epstein and what is finally coming to light. So picture a stickman. But this one doesn't come from poverty like Pablo. Doesn't come from rejection like Hitler. Doesn't come from ideology like bin Laden. This one comes from obscurity. A middle-class kid from Coney Island, Brooklyn. Born in 1953. No famous family. No inherited fortune. No obvious path to the circles he would eventually inhabit. And yet, by the 1980s, Jeffrey Epstein is moving through the highest levels of global society like he was born there. So the first question isn't what he did. The first question is, how did he get in the room? Because that answer explains everything else. Epstein was brilliant in a specific and dangerous way. Not academically. He dropped out of college, was hired to teach at an elite Manhattan prep school without a degree, and was eventually let go. No fortune, no credentials, no obvious reason for anyone powerful to take his calls. But he had something rarer than any of those things. He had the ability to make powerful people feel seen, understood, intellectually engaged. He read voraciously. He could talk physics with scientists, money with bankers, politics with politicians. He made every person in the room feel like they were the most interesting person he'd ever encountered. That skill is worth more than any diploma. It is the skeleton key to every locked room in the world. He attaches himself to a Wall Street banker named Bear Stearns in the late 1970s. Moves fast, learns faster, and then pivots into private wealth management, claiming to manage money exclusively for billionaires. A minimum entry of $1 billion. An aura of exclusivity so total that people assumed anyone that's selective must be extraordinary. He built his reputation less on results and more on the intoxicating feeling of being chosen by him. And it worked. By the 1990s, Jeffrey Epstein is in the orbit of some of the most powerful people on Earth. Financiers, politicians, royalty, scientists, heads of state. His contact book reads like a directory of global influence. And here is where the story turns. Because Epstein didn't just collect powerful friends. He collected leverage. His homes were not just homes. His island was not just an island. His planes were not just planes. They were environments. Carefully constructed environments. Where powerful people were encouraged to do things that they could never allow to become public. And that distinction, between friendship and entrapment, between hospitality and control, is the engine of everything that follows. Because what Epstein was building was not a social network. It was a blackmail infrastructure, dressed in the aesthetics of wealth and leisure, hidden behind the social currency of being seen with the right people. And at the center of it were the victims, young girls, some as young as 14, recruited through networks that preyed on economic vulnerability. Girls from difficult backgrounds, struggling families, situations where an offer of money for a simple massage seemed like a solution to a real problem. And then the situation became something else entirely. Something they were not prepared for. Something they did not consent to. Something that stole from them in ways that don't heal cleanly. This went on for years. Across multiple properties. His Manhattan mansion. His Palm Beach estate. His private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, Little St. James. His ranch in New Mexico. His Paris apartment. A geographic network of locations that made jurisdiction complicated and accountability diffuse. And it continued. Because the people who might have stopped it were themselves connected to the man at the center of it. That is how systems like this survive. Not through perfect secrecy. Through the calculation that exposure hurts everyone in the room. The first crack appears in 2005. A parent in Palm Beach contacts local police. A detective named Joe Carey begins building a case. What he uncovers is not the behavior of one man with one victim. It is an organized system with dozens of identified girls and a clear operational structure. The case is referred to federal prosecutors. And here is where something goes profoundly wrong. Because the prosecution that follows, the one that should have dismantled that entire network, doesn't. Instead, in 2008, Epstein's legal team negotiates what becomes one of the most controversial plea agreements in American legal history. He pleads guilty to 2 state charges of soliciting prostitution, serves 13 months in a county jail, with work release that allowed him to leave the facility 6 days a week. The deal is arranged by then U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta. It grants immunity not just to Epstein, but to any potential co-conspirators, and it is kept secret from the victims, who had a legal right to be informed. The victims find out through the press. Years later, the girls who came forward, who spoke to detectives, who trusted the system to do something, watched the man at the center of what happened to them walk back into his mansion. That failure is not a footnote. That failure is a fundamental part of this story, because it demonstrates precisely how protection operates at a certain level of wealth and connection, not through dramatic cover-ups, through process, through legal complexity, through teams of attorneys who know exactly how to transform a systemic crime into a manageable charge. The story goes quiet for nearly a decade. And then, a journalist named Julie K. Brown at the Miami Herald refuses to let it stay quiet. She spends years tracking down victims, listening to them, building a documented, sourced, verified account of what happened in Palm Beach. And in November 2018, she publishes it, Perversion of Justice. The series lands like an earthquake, because it doesn't just recount the crimes. It documents the failure, the deal, the secrecy, the systemic protection of a man who should have faced the full weight of federal prosecution a decade earlier. The public pressure becomes impossible to ignore. July 2019. Federal agents arrest Jeffrey Epstein at Teterboro Airport as he returns from Paris. He is charged with sex trafficking of minors. The indictment describes a decades-long pattern. The potential sentence is 45 years in federal prison. For the first time, it seems like the full machinery of accountability is actually engaged. And then, August 10, 2019. Jeffrey Epstein is found dead in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. The medical examiner rules it suicide by hanging. His attorneys dispute that conclusion. Investigators note multiple irregularities. The cameras monitoring his cell malfunction. His cellmate is transferred the night before. Scheduled checks are not performed on time. And the man who possessed more documented knowledge about the private behavior of more powerful people than perhaps anyone alive is gone, taking with him the possibility of cooperation, of testimony, of names spoken under oath in open court. The silence that follows is loud, but the documents don't disappear, because the civil case brought by Virginia Giuffre against Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's longtime companion, alleged recruiter, and alleged co-architect of the abuse network, had generated hundreds of pages of depositions, testimonies, and records, all sealed, and then, through years of legal pressure, unsealed. Name by name, page by page, the documents begin emerging publicly in January 2024. And what they contain is not a simple list of confirmed perpetrators. It is something more complex and in some ways more unsettling. Names, dozens of them, some in the context of witness testimony, some in depositions where individuals are asked if they had contact with Epstein, some in records of who flew on his planes, logged in the so-called flight logs, some in the context of allegations made by victims. And here is where clarity matters enormously, because the internet does not do nuance well. And with a story this explosive, nuance is everything. Being named in these documents means different things in different contexts. A name appearing in a flight log means someone flew on Epstein's plane. That is not evidence of a crime. A name appearing in a deposition means someone was asked about their connection to Epstein. That is not evidence of a crime. A name appearing in a victim's testimony as someone who participated in abuse. That is categorically different. And those distinctions are being collapsed in real time across social media, creating a landscape where confirmed abusers and people with tangential social connections are being discussed in the same breath. That collapse serves no one. It does not serve justice. It does not serve the victims. It does not serve truth. What the documents do confirm, clearly, undeniably, across multiple sources, is that Jeffrey Epstein operated an organized system of child sex trafficking for decades. That Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted in December 2021 of 5 federal charges, including sex trafficking of a minor and sentenced to 20 years in prison. That the 2008 plea deal was a profound failure of the justice system. And that the victims, women who are now adults carrying what was done to them when they were girls, fought for years through civil and criminal courts to make any of this visible at all. Their persistence is the reason these documents exist. Their courage in speaking to investigators, in filing civil suits, in going on record, is the only reason any of this is public. And that is the part of this story that most headlines bury. Not the famous names, not the speculation. The women who refused to stay silent when every incentive in the system told them to. So what is actually happening right now? Documents are continuing to be released through ongoing court proceedings. Names are emerging. Context is being examined. Investigations in multiple jurisdictions are either ongoing or being called for. The question of who knew, who participated, and who used their power to ensure the 2008 deal stayed quiet is not closed. And the question of what happened to the intelligence value of Epstein's network, who he was working with, whether any government had knowledge of or interest in his operations, remains one of the most contested and genuinely unresolved threads in this entire story. What is not happening, despite what you may see online, is a simple, complete revelation of a list of confirmed criminals. The truth is slower than that, more procedural, more frustrating. It moves through courts, not through viral videos. It is established through evidence, not through shares. And in the gap between what the documents actually say and what people want them to say, misinformation spreads at a speed that the truth cannot match. So here's what matters. Follow the verified documents, not the commentary. Understand the difference between named and charged, between alleged and convicted, between association and participation, and keep the focus where it belongs. On the question of how a system like this operates for decades in plain sight. On what it tells us about the relationship between extreme wealth and accountability. On the specific, identifiable failures of institutions that were supposed to protect children and chose instead to protect process. And on the women who were harmed, whose lives were taken from them in pieces, who came forward anyway, who kept pushing when every door was closed. Because this story is ultimately their story, not his, theirs. And the measure of whether justice is actually happening is not which famous name appears in which document. It is whether the system that failed those girls is being genuinely examined, and whether we are willing to look at what that system reveals about the world we have built. If this story clarified something you needed to understand, share it with someone who is trying to separate the facts from the noise. Because right now, that distinction matters more than almost anything else. This was the Epstein files, and the full story is still being written in courtrooms, not comment sections.